Are you?
Yes, go ahead and bring them in.
The jurors are present, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to make sure that I have everybody I think I should have here. So as I say your juror number, if you'll just raise your hand. B35. Okay, B29. Okay. B12. B76. B51. B7. B37. B86. B55, E6, E40, E54, E73, M75, B61, B72, B22, E22, thank you, E13, E28, K80, K95, P67, G14. Did I miss anybody? Okay. I'm going to release you till Tuesday morning. So first of all, again, I want to thank you for your patience. And before I release you for the weekend, I'm going to give you my admonitions, and they are as follows. You are not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about this case. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by that instruction?
Yes.
You're not to get on the Internet by using any type of electronic device to do any independent research about this case, people, places, things, terminology. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by that instruction?
Yes.
You are not to read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or social networking pages about the case. Do I have your assurance that you'll abide by that instruction?
Yes.
And finally, you're not to discuss the case amongst yourselves nor with anybody else. Being away and mixing with friends and family and maybe coworkers from now until Tuesday morning, they're going to be very curious, and they're going to want to ask you some questions. And my instruction to you is that you should tell them that you are potentially on this jury, and you are not to have any conversation with them whatsoever. No conversation about the process that we're going through in jury selection. No conversation about any questionnaires that you filled out. No conversation about anything. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do I have your assurances that you will abide by these instructions?
Yes.
Okay. If you'll follow Deputy Jarvis, we'll make sure you're. We'll see you Tuesday morning at 9 a.m.
We're working on the second.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, you may. Mm-hmm. Please be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and again, thank you for your patience. Just to make sure that I have the right people here in the courtroom, when I call out your juror number, please raise your hand. H69, H81, H86, I5, I14, I19, I24, thank you, I33, I42, I44, I46, I49, I54, I64, I65, I66, I68, I76, I79. Is there anybody else who's here that I did not call your number? Okay, you have not come in here yet to go through the individual questioning, and we will not get to you today. So instead of keeping you here today, I'm going to release you until Monday at 9 a.m. When you leave the courtroom, the deputies will tell you where they want you to report on Monday at 9 a.m. Before I let you go, I want to give you some instructions, first of which is you are not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by that instruction? Yes. You're not to use any type of a device, electronic device, to get on the internet to do any independent research about the case. That means people, places, things, terminology. Do I have your assurance that you'll abide by that instruction? Yes. You are not to create or read any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or social networking pages about the case. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by that instruction? Okay, and equally as important is that you're not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. You're going to be going maybe back to work, back home, visiting with friends and family. They're going to be very curious about the fact that you're sitting here waiting to be questioned for this case. If they start to talk about the case, please tell them to stop and leave them at once. Tell them that you've been instructed not to say anything about the case. And that includes you're sitting here waiting for questioning for the jury. It includes the juror questionnaire, anything whatsoever to do with this case. Do I have your assurance that you will not have any discussions with anyone? Yes. Okay, with that, you'll be dismissed until Monday morning at 9 a.m. Yes, sir? Were you going to say so? You were just getting ready to stand. Okay. Monday morning, 9 a.m., and Deputy Jarvis will let you know where they want you. Okay, thank you. How long till we get to the first one? Okay. Please be seated. The next potential juror will be coming in a moment.
Your Honor, G29.
Please be seated. Good morning. You're going to be continue to be referred to as Juror G29. The attorneys will have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out Tuesday morning. We're going to begin with Mr. De Luanda.
Please support. Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
My name is Bernie Del Rio, and I'm going to be asking a series of questions about the questionnaire you filled out in terms of publicity. Okay. If I've got it right here, you stated Zimmerman killed Martin while on neighborhood watch. Mr. Zimmerman states it was for self-defense.
Yes.
Okay. And then you stated your sources was the radio?
Yes.
Okay. And also the second part I couldn't, Phillips something?
Oh, Jeff Phillips on the Phillips farm.
All right. Tell me, did you have any, in terms of how you gathered this information from the media, TV at all?
No, I don't follow the news at all.
Okay.
Ever.
And how about the newspaper?
No.
How about online in terms of the newspaper or TV stations at all?
No.
Any national news at all?
No. I try to stay uninvolved, I guess.
I'm sorry?
I said I try to stay uninvolved.
Uninvolved?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And tell me about, I'm not aware of 104.1. What kind of radio station? Is it a talk show type thing?
Yes, it's all talk radio.
Okay. And how often do you listen to that? Is that all the time at like work? Or
no, it's just like if I'm, if I happen to be in the car and it's around that time, I just pop it on. Okay. But not regularly.
And then Phillips Price, is it?
No, it's the Phillips File.
Phillips File?
Yes, that's the name of his show.
Okay. I apologize. I couldn't read your writing. Tell me a little bit about that.
He's talk radio. I guess he's pretty popular at around rush hour.
Okay.
He talks about current events, things like that.
And those would have been your two main sources of gathering information about the case?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you gathered this information, was that at the beginning, back in February, right after it happened in 2012, or was it more recently?
It was back in the beginning, right after it happened.
Have you kind of kept up with the case as it's progressed through the stages of, the murder and then arrest and then now through court proceedings?
No.
Okay. Was your main exposure to the media at the very beginning stages?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, as best you can recall, and I know you've notated here in terms of you got the fact that Mr. Zimmerman, in terms of shooting Mr. Trayvon Martin, what else do you recall about the case? itself in terms of the exposure you've had?
That there was a lot of, I guess, racial tension. That was
Okay.
the gist of what I could, I guess, figure out.
Okay. Anything else you can remember? Do you remember any photographs at all?
I remember, I think his mugshot.
Okay.
That was about it.
Okay. The mugshot, since you haven't seen it on TV, was that online or just on TV in passing? Or?
That was in TV in passing.
Okay. How about any other photographs that you recall?
A picture of Mr. Martin, and that was at like around the same time.
Okay. And the mugshot, when people refer to mugshots as anything, what kind of photograph was it? Do you remember what it looked like of Mr. Zimmerman?
I believe there was some bruising.
Some bruising?
To the face.
Okay. And I gather you stated you have not come to an opinion as a result of what you've been exposed to. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the photograph that you saw of Mr. Zimmerman, some bruising to the face, you didn't come to any conclusions as a result of that, or did you?
I'm assuming there was an altercation, but I mean, that's...
Okay. That's what we're trying to find out. We don't know what's in your mind, so we're having you talk to both sides in terms of what you remember and whether your impressions. So you would assume that there was, what did you say, some altercation? Okay. And you're doing a great job of answering, but unfortunately, when we talk, sometimes we just go, and the court reporter needs to take down the answers of it, yes or no.
Okay.
No, that's fine. We all do it. So I can understand what you're saying, but the court reporter needs to make sure she gets it.
Okay, correct.
Okay. Do you remember anything else about the what occurred between Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Martin in terms of the shooting or anything like that?
No.
Okay. How about anything after that in terms of his arrest or anything like that? Do you remember anything about that?
No.
Okay. You mentioned racial tensions. Can you expand on that a little bit? Tell us what you mean by that.
Following that, I remember a couple of my friends on Facebook posting like their opinions and comments about it.
Okay.
And that was about it. But I know that it was leaned more towards racial than anything.
All right. Did you place any significance on that one way or the other?
No, I just blew it off because people just like to just give their own opinions on things without knowing.
Okay. Did you respond at all to your Facebook friends when they posted that on there? Did you say, no, that's not true, or yeah, I agree, or
No.
Did you respond at all to that?
No, I normally don't respond to things like that because I'm so uninformed. So I read it and I went on.
Okay. And then you also mentioned was the people you talked to, and when I say talk, I mean I know on Facebook sometimes I guess you interact. Were those close friends of yours that posted that, or just friends that? And what I understand from Facebook, I don't do it with my wife and kids do. That some people you can have close friends kind of thing, or that you can have anybody in the world potentially.
It was people that I used to go to school with back in high school. So I guess now we're acquaintances because I don't like run into them or have lunch with them or anything. It's just people that I've known from the past.
Okay, so they're not friends that you interact with. What you would consult friends in terms of socially meeting with them.
No.
Those are internet friends, I guess you call them. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did that sway you one way or the other on the case, their opinions about it?
No.
Were their opinions favorable to Mr. Zimmerman or favorable to Mr. Martin, or just commenting?
They were favorable to Mr. Martin.
Okay. And those opinions did not sway you one way or the other, is that correct?
That's correct.
How about the radio, the 104.1, and then also the other talk show person? Did those opinions or commentary and on both of those sway you one way or the other in the case?
No.
Were those on 104.1, the commentary, was it favorable to Mr. Martin, or was it favorable to Mr. Zimmerman, or was it just kind of stating the facts and then throwing opinions in there?
The way I perceived it, it was kind of going both sides. Like there were just a bunch of people like throwing in their opinions. So it was.
Okay. So was it people just calling in and saying, this should happen or this shouldn't, or I believe one side, I believe the other? Is it just kind of everybody interjecting themselves? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you're probably prepared then to sit as a juror because you'll be hearing evidence one way or the other.
Yes.
In other words, are you prepared to, if you're asked to sit as a juror, and if you make you have the privilege of sitting as a juror, are you able to set aside whatever commentary you've heard on the radio, people's opinions and all that, and make your decision only on what actually happens in the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you do that?
I can do that.
Is there any doubt in your mind that you can be objective to both sides in this case?
No, there's no doubt in my mind.
We know we talked about the Facebook friends. Have you personally talked to anybody about the case other than just in passing? And what I'm saying is, have you had a discussion with people in the community, friends or family or co-workers, in which you've gone into a discussion, an extensive discussion about the case?
No.
Have you in any way visited any of the websites, if there are any, dedicated to either Mr. Zimmerman or on behalf of Mr. Martin?
No.
Anything else in terms of the racial tensions other than the people commenting about it?
What do you mean?
What I mean is any other things that you can recall other than people commenting about the racial tensions?
Oh, no. It was just that.
And I apologize if you've already answered this, but the exposure you had was no TV other than just in passing. You're not one of those regular TV watchers
No.
at 6 o'clock. You watch the news at 6:30.
I avoid it like the plague, pretty much. I don't really follow news or any of that stuff.
How about in any other setting that you attend, any discussions about the case that impacted you or that you were exposed to? And I'm talking about not just in passing that there's a case going on. I'm talking about like an extensive discussion about the case.
No discussion.
Okay, nothing comes to mind?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any of the proceedings being discussed in any of these talk radio or other shows? And what I'm asking is in terms of what was going on in court, were there discussions about that at some point?
No. Not that I can recall.
Your exposure then would have been at the very early stages?
Correct. It was like the very beginning.
Okay. So you were not curious as to what was going on in the courtroom between then?
No.
Okay, all right. You got your jury summons 3-4 weeks ago. Did you say, "Oh, I potentially might be on this case. Let me do some research on it, or let me find out what's going on"?
No. I just got it in the mail and I was like, great.
Okay.
Pretty much.
All right. And you realize, as everybody does, in terms of when jury duty is I would submit a privilege, in terms of we ask people to take time from their everyday jobs or lives and set it aside to serve as jurors, because that's part of our obligations as citizens of this great country and of this community. You agree with that concept?
For the most part, yes.
Okay. All right. And I realize most people do not get overly excited when they get that summons. Part of the things that I want to also discuss with you today is the court has made a determination that if we're estimating how long the trial will take. We have estimated anywhere from 2 to possibly up to 4 weeks. So we're asking people to take time from their everyday lives and jobs and set aside and pay attention to the case and being able to dedicate the time necessary. Part of the process, too, is once we get a jury, the court has made a determination that the jury will be sequestered so that the media will be exposed. You won't be exposed to media. Your contact will be limited. Can you agree to abide by that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions or concerns about that?
No.
Okay. Glad to have a moment, Your Honor. Philip File, I guess is what it is. Is that part of 104. Whatever you said, 104.1?
Yes.
Okay. Did that individual ever express an opinion about the case? You say it was favorable to Mr. Martin, or?
The way I gathered, I believe he was probably more favorable towards Mr. Martin.
Okay. Did that sway you in any way in getting you to favor one side versus the other?
No, because I know him to be pretty biased on his opinion. So
you believe he's biased one side?
Yeah, on most of everything I've heard.
Okay. Well, did that in any way turn you off in terms of against and in favor of Mr. Martin?
No, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion, so I listen more for entertainment purposes than anything else.
Okay, all right. I'm going to have a moment. Regarding the racial tensions that you mentioned, was that based on Philip File or 1.4 in terms of commentary, or was that just things you heard in the community?
Things I heard from the community, I guess. It wasn't from the radio.
Okay. Did, when you heard that, did they attribute the cause or the source of the racial tensions to any particular group or individual?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Further questions?
Thank you, Ms. O'Mara.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Okay, thanks.
I don't think that we've told you yet what this part of the process is about. So you may have gleaned it from Mr. De Leon's questions, trying to find out what you sort of bring into the courtroom here today about the case, what we call pretrial publicity, but just to get a feel for your sort of predispositions one way or the other, or what information you have about it. So that's why we're going to ask you some more questions about that, okay?
Okay.
It sounds like the only place that you get your current events information from then is one of 4.1?
Yes.
Other
In
than-
passing. Like, it's not like I don't watch it or listen to it religiously. It's just, I just happened to be in the radio and it was on that day.
Okay. Any other sources at all that you keep up on those things that interest you?
Probably Yahoo.
I'm sorry?
Yahoo.
Okay. Just, so is that sort of your go-to then on the internet for any type of information?
Mm-hmm.
And again, as he mentioned, we can understand you. She has to. So if
I'm
you
sorry.
were,
Yes.
that's okay. I do it a lot myself. Tell me what, if anything, you remember seeing or learning about this case from your viewing of Yahoo.
I didn't look at it on Yahoo. It's just, that's where I get my news from, pretty much. But when I look things up, it's mostly about like sports or frivolous.
Okay. Do you recall about when this happened, this event happened with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin?
From what he said, it was last year, beginning of last year.
Okay. I'm asking.
But
not
I
the
don't.
particular
I
date.
personally
No,
don't know. Yeah.
certainly not. But I was curious. Do you remember whenever the date was that it happened?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Tell me what the first thing was that you remember, first event that sticks in your mind about this. What was that?
I remember hearing something about a African American male passing, and they had a suspect,
Okay.
and that was pretty much it. Like I didn't really have like any major details as far as that. I heard it one day, and then a little bit of time had passed, and then there was more information.
Okay. The first little snippet that you heard, do you remember where you heard that?
That was probably from the radio.
Okay. And again, probably 104.1, not
Yes.
holding you to it, probably.
Yes.
And then the next time that you heard about it, you said at first that there was a shooting and that they had a suspect.
Yes.
But any information on who the suspect was?
Yes, they named him.
Okay.
And then they were speaking about like the gun laws and all that stuff. That's when like all the gun talk came into play. I believe it was still on the Phillips file that I heard it too.
Okay. And you had answered a question to Mr. De Leon that was that you heard that there was some racial tension because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Was that from the beginning, from the first time you heard about it, or when did that sort of fall upon you as being one of the elements of it?
About like the second or third time I heard about it on the radio, like there was a lot of like racial tension and build-up going on about that case.
Tell me what you knew about that racial tension.
I just knew it was a young African-American male, and then in the beginning I heard it was a white male that killed him, as far as that went.
Okay.
And so, like, I guess that always gets, like, a lot of play because it's always, like, there's, like, a divide in, like, color, I guess.
Okay. Anything particular when you say racial tension, how did that sort of fall on you? What was it that presented itself to you as being a tense event because of the racial distinction?
Because they kept bringing it up. Like, I mean, if it was just, like, one person, killing another, like, they don't normally go into that much detail or emphasis as far as color goes. But this one, they happen to keep mentioning it often.
Okay. Did you pay any particular attention to it because of the racial overtones?
No.
And as you were going through it, then we now talked about the first couple events, the very first time when you heard that there was a shooting, and then when you know that there was some ongoing coverage of it. Tell me, sort of as we're going through that path, what the next thing was that you became aware of.
That was pretty much it. Like, I just tried to, like, stay away from it. But I got the gist of it, and then I was like, okay, on to the next thing.
And was that an intentional decision to stay away from it?
Yes, on my part, yes.
Why?
Because I like I said before, I don't really like to get that involved as far as current events. It's just something that I do for myself.
Okay. Did you make any decision at that point that the racial overtones of it were justified or not justified?
No. Because I didn't know enough about it to go one way or another.
And then I think that you mentioned that one piece of physical evidence that you remember was a picture of Mr. Zimmerman, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe that again for me?
I'm assuming it was a mugshot because it just had him. It had the camera pointed straight at him, and there was bruising on his face.
Injuries on his face?
Yes, injuries.
Did that give you any pause and to consider what may have happened to him?
Like I said, I just assumed that there was a physical altercation between him and the victim.
From the media, did you glean any information that George Zimmerman may have done anything wrong?
No.
Similar question from that picture or anything else. Did you make any conclusion or thought that Trayvon Martin may have done anything wrong?
From that, no.
No?
It could have been like an accident, freak accident or whatever, but I didn't know enough about it to sway one way or the other.
Now, do you go to church?
No.
Have you in the past year and a half?
No.
Are there any other programs that you listen to at 104.1?
The Monsters in the Morning.
Okay.
It's like the morning radio station.
Yeah, I'm
Talk
familiar
show.
with it.
No.
Let's talk about Jim Files first. That is sort of your default, sometimes in the afternoon. I think he does the rush hour, you said?
Mm-hmm. Usually I'm in the car about that time, so if I'm in the car, I kind of switch back and forth between him and radio, like music.
From the exposure that you've had listening to him, what's his perspective on this case?
I think he was leaning more towards like murder instead of it being an accident.
And I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, I'm good.
Okay. And tell me what you remember, how that showed itself, Mr. Phillips' perspective. What did he say that you remember?
I remember him kind of being angry about how things went down as far as like all I remember him saying is that Mr. Martin went to go buy something from the gas station and Mr. Zimmerman perceived him to be a threat, and so he got out of his car and started I don't know, I guess harassing him. And so he thought like maybe he was racial profiling, and that's where I got the whole race thing from.
Mm-hmm. Did you find out any other information from him or from any other source that would contradict that?
No, I didn't go any further into it, so.
Anything else that Jim Phillips would have said about this case that you remember? Let me ask you this way. If I ask you to come up with 3 high points of listening to Jim Files, 3 high points of what he said could be comment on evidence, could be just his own personal perspective, but 3 things that you remember Mr. Phillips saying about this case, what would they be?
Probably that it was an African American male versus a Caucasian male. That it was not really Mr. Zimmerman's place to, I guess, approach him. And then I can't really think of a third. I guess that Mr. Zimmerman was in the wrong. That's what he voiced his opinion about.
Do you recall Mr. Phillips ever commenting on particular pieces of evidence?
I remember there being a gun,
Okay.
but that was about it. As far as evidence.
Okay. Do you recall what he said about the gun?
No.
Or the use of the gun?
No.
Do you ever comment on any other parts of the case itself, like whether or not there was other evidence, be it audio evidence or video evidence or anything like that?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, the main purpose of this little inquiry is not just to test your memory as much as to get it out on the table, talk about it, because the real part of this inquiry is supposed to be this, and that is whatever you heard from any source, Mr. Phillips, Yahoo, or wherever, that's not evidence and
right.
not to be considered evidence if you were to sit on the jury. Do you believe that different media outlets might have a certain bias or slant on how they present things?
Yes, that's
Mr.
why I don't watch it. Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes, that's why I try to stay clear of news and media, because everybody, even though they try and, like, I guess convey the truth or whatever, like everybody has their own spin on it or their own perception of what happened. So.
And I think you acknowledged, as most people would, that Mr. Phillips certainly has a point of view on most things he talks about.
Yes.
And that it may not be agreed to by everybody, and that's part of the reason why he says it.
Correct.
To the extent that you have heard that information from him or any other source, how would you handle it if you sat on the jury, listened to all the evidence, and evidence that you heard conflicted with what you remember hearing from Mr. Phillips?
As my understanding, like, I'm not supposed to, like, use what I heard prior to being on the jury as to sway my opinion one way or another. Like, it's just supposed to be what happens in here. So it wouldn't make a difference to me.
So which one then would you default to, that which you heard in the courtroom from the witness stand, or what you remember from Phillips or somebody else?
Whatever I heard in the courtroom would be what I base it upon.
And if, in the same sense, another juror tried to bring in information from outside the courtroom in deliberations, like, I remember hearing about this, but never stood up on the witness stand, but I'm certain I heard about it, how would you handle that problem?
I don't know, like, how I'm supposed to handle it, but I wouldn't take any of that into consideration if it was just coming from, like, outside the courtroom.
And that's the right answer. There's not any particular right answer. One woman said she'd call it a bailiff or a deputy. That's a pretty good answer, too. Just, I guess the point being that you would only consider and allow the rest of the jury to consider that which you heard from within the courtroom walls. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. When you received the jury summons, did you speak to anybody about it?
I remember posting a picture of it on Facebook and saying, not again. But other than that, like, I mentioned it to my mother.
Okay. And what was the purpose in putting your summons on Facebook?
It was just something to do.
Okay. And when you said not again, have you served before?
Well, I was summoned before, but I never made it to the courtroom.
And how long ago was that?
A couple of years ago. In a different county.
Have you lived in Seminole County long?
No, it's been about 8 months, maybe.
You luckily got to the top of the list pretty quickly then.
Yay.
In any of the information that you heard from the Phillips file or anywhere else, was the concept of self-defense discussed?
I think that was thrown around once or twice, yes.
Tell me about what you heard about that.
I heard that there was an altercation and that Mr. Zimmerman felt his life was in danger, so he decided to defend himself from Mr. Martin.
Do you know whether or not that information came from Jim Phillips?
Not that I can recall. I don't remember where I heard it from.
Okay. And I think you said that you told your mom about the summons?
Yes.
At that point, did you know that it might be for the Zimmerman case?
No.
At some point, did you realize that it might be for the Zimmerman case?
Yes.
When was that?
Talked about it a little bit more, and it was right before I had to go on vacation, and then she mentioned that they were doing the jury selection for his case, and then I found out it was indeed.
Okay. What were the conversations you had with your mom about that?
It was just in passing. Like, we try and communicate at least every couple of days about everything, so it was just maybe like a 5-minute conversation.
Okay. Did she have a reaction that you might be sitting on the Zimmerman case?
No.
And from your view or just exposure to the media, did you hear any information about either George Zimmerman's background or Trayvon Martin's background?
No.
And that included comments from Phillips, nothing from him about any of those?
No.
When I started, and also when Mr. De Leon just started, we talked about this just being a process to try and find out what you have in your memory banks so that we know about it. Anything that either I've talked about or that you've thought about since Mr. De Leon asked the questions about media exposure, or what we call pre-trial publicity, that we haven't covered? Anything else that you sort of popped in your mind? You remember seeing this picture or hearing this on TV or on Yahoo, anything like that?
No.
Okay. Just have 1 minute, Your Honor. Just a couple more questions. I know you said you talked to your mom about at least serving on the jury, that you stay in touch with her. In those conversations, has she formed an opinion at all or any insight on her thoughts on this case?
No.
Ever talked to her about it at all?
No.
Okay. And to summarize, your main information about this case is from the Phillips file, or 104, more generally, and maybe a touch from Yahoo, no other sources from the internet. Any discussions with any family, other family besides your mom?
No.
And any discussion with any friends?
No.
Even after you got the summons?
Correct.
Okay. Great. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated and counsel approach when you're ready. 29, if you'll follow Corporal Demps, and we'll have the next juror. Please be seated. Okay, and good morning, sir, and we're going to refer to you as G47. And the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out on Tuesday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Obviously, we're limited at this phase in asking you questions about just the publicity and whether you have any conflicts, et cetera. You mentioned in your questionnaire that you've been exposed to some minor coverage on Channels 13, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that the main source of the information in terms of from the media?
That would be probably the main source. I mean, I work at a restaurant that has televisions on, and some of it is news coverage. So, I mean, I've seen bits and pieces of all sorts of different coverage as I'm working.
So, various channels, both local and national?
Yeah, mostly CNN and Fox, and then at my house I usually watch 13 because that's about it.
Okay. You also noted in your questionnaire that you've been informed, have mostly been informed that the cases of supposed self-defense informed by just the news or just by people commenting about it or friends or family?
Combination of all of that.
Okay.
The news has stated it, friends, family, people that come into my job and talk about it, you know.
So everybody's expressing opinion, I guess.
Everybody has something to say about everything.
Sure. Okay. Is that true not just of this topic, but of anything?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you stated that, but you don't have much time for the news because I'm not really clear on the particulars. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I work 50 hours a week, and I have 2 dogs in my house that I take care of, and my parents aren't always well, so I take care of them as well. So I don't have a lot of time to pay attention, so I don't. Okay.
All right. Let's, if I could, let me prod your memory as best I can, and as best as you can recall.
Yes, sir.
What do you remember about the case?
From what I remember, I know that it happened in Sanford, and I couldn't remember what month. I know it happened last year, but from what I've heard, that Mr. Zimmerman was involved in a situation with a young black male, and then, you know, the self-defense is what I've heard, but, you know, the boy ended up being killed, and that was it.
Okay. And you mentioned self-defense. I gather, is that language that was used by other people in commenting about the case,
yeah.
Or did you automatically come to that conclusion when you evaluated? You haven't evaluated the evidence.
Not really, no. I haven't looked at much of the evidence, and personally I try and withhold my judgment on almost any case, even when it's covered in the news, because the news has always got something to spin on it. So I like to wait until I can hear things from a more neutral perspective.
So you're of the opinion that the media, either intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes has a bias to the way they...
Right. You know, they hear things, they talk about it, and then, you know, the next day they might hear something different, and that's what they're going to talk about that day.
And you would agree that the media, besides just giving hard facts or news, they sometimes interject their opinion.
Absolutely.
In both either the newscaster or sometimes they have people comment on live. Okay.
Yep.
Have you noticed any of that, or have you watched any of those commentators talking about the case on one side or the other, or you know, sometimes it's debated?
I haven't like sat down to watch it in particular. No, I've seen pieces of it and heard from it, you know, from my parents and from other family members in different states.
Do you remember anything else about the case other than what you mentioned? Here, let me prod you. Do you remember any photographs at all, if there are photographs related to the case?
I'm sure that I've seen them, but nothing like pops out in my head, no.
Okay. Anything else about court proceedings in terms of discussions or arguments or presentations to the court? Anything about those proceedings at all?
Not really, no.
Okay. Anything else about whether there were any other pieces of evidence, you know, either testimony that was presented or recordings or anything related to the case that you can recall?
Not that I know of. I'm sure I've heard bits and pieces or seen something on, but nothing in particular that pops out to me that I heard very directly.
Yes, sir. So if I were to ask you at this time, what key points do you remember about the Zimmerman case? Have you notated them on your note here? On your
just about, yeah.
I mean, okay. Anything else that comes to mind? Anything that if I were to ask you, tell me about Zimmerman, the case involving Zimmerman and the death of Trayvon Martin, what would you say?
I couldn't tell you much about it other than Mr. Zimmerman is obviously the defendant in that situation, and unfortunately Trayvon Martin is not with us anymore.
Okay, all right. Did you listen to, in passing or just specifically when you were watching TV, not working, do you recall anything else kind of collateral to the case, anything else related to the case that wasn't necessarily in the courtroom or evidence? Do you remember anything about that at all?
I know that there was a lot of stuff going on in Sanford at the time, and a lot of very prominent people showed up, Mr. Al Sharpton, and some of those people held rallies and things. Obviously, I heard about that living in the area.
What were your impressions about that? Did you think that was a good thing, a bad thing, or no opinion whatsoever, or just they had the right to free speech? And did you come one way or the other on that?
I would go more with, they're allowed to do whatever they want, and, they obviously felt strongly about what had happened, and they have the right in the United States of America to express that and to do a rally and have their say in it.
And what we're both sides, that is, on behalf of the state and defense, are trying to prod you in terms of whether, and I know you stated your ultimate question is you don't have an opinion in terms
Correct.
of the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman, is that correct?
Correct.
So you can be a fair juror and listen to the evidence and the law and use your common sense in evaluating that.
Absolutely, to the best of my ability.
So my question is, when you heard about the rallies, or I think you mentioned somebody coming from out of town, Mr. Sharpton, et cetera, were your first impressions one of he's exercising the right to free speech, or he and other people out there, or necessarily in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of Mr. Martin? Were you swayed one way or the other because of that?
From what I know about the rallies and what I've heard, that they were more in favor of Mr. Martin.
Okay. Did that sway you in any way? In other words,
not particularly, no.
Okay. Did you resent that there was somebody coming from out of town here to this community, and people got together, and they, in other words, did that bias you against Mr. Martin's in terms of his death or us prosecuting the person, Mr. Zimmerman?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. I know you work, what you say, 50 hours a week? Have you had time since that first started, in terms of when February of last year, until recently, to follow the case other than in passing?
I know I haven't looked it up at all. No.
Okay. My question is, sometimes people get on the internet, and they start pulling up George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin to see what's going on. Have you done any of that?
I'm sure that at some point in between February and now I may have, not that I remember particularly, but I'm sure that I have, because it was talked about a lot, and I heard about it, so I'm sure I looked up minor particulars here and there, but nothing too crazy.
In doing that, were you focusing on just one, or were you trying to, I don't want to say educate, but become informed about what was happening?
It'd be informed. I never try and look at one side of something. I always try and look at, if I'm looking at something, I want to find out what everybody has to say about it, not what one particular person has to say.
So were you trying to become informed just so you'll have a better understanding of what the case was about?
Mostly to find out what was, the rallies and stuff kind of, they shut areas of the city down, so, I live around here, and it impacted my life, so I was like, what's going on? Why can't I go that way?
Right, okay. How about once you got the summons, did your curiosity, your antennas go up again and say, ooh, I might be involved in this case at all?
Not in this case, but my family had mentioned a couple of things about it, absolutely, because they pay more attention to it, and they were like, you have jury duty on the 10th.
Okay, so they told you that it may involve the case involving George Zimmerman?
Yeah.
Okay. In doing that, did they give you, as most parents do, give you words of wisdom?
No.
Or and I'm not saying that they did, I'm just saying my question is, did they give you their insight about the case, like, oh, well, you need to know ABC about George Zimmerman, or you need to know ABC about Trayvon Martin, or about the case, anything?
No, none of that. My parents are of the same mindset. They were like, that could be that case, but, we're not going to say anything, because just in case it does happen, you shouldn't have any opinion about it as far as what we're concerned with.
I know you've abided by the court's admonitions in terms of not doing any research. When you got the summons back 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, did you, not knowing what case it was going to be, did you do any follow-up research just in case because some jurors sometimes think, oh, I got to be more informed, I got to get more information so I can let people know.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Again, I work 50 hours a week. I didn't.
Okay, all right. And we realize that people, when they're asked to serve as jurors, it's not, a lot of people don't get overly excited about it, but we realize that most people understand it as their civic duty as part of living in this great country. But we realize that that causes a hardship in the sense of having to spend time away from family and friends, and also work. We realize, but that's the only way our system works, in order for people to do that.
Absolutely.
And my question to you is, sir, the court has made a determination. We have, first of all, as best we can, once we get a jury, estimated that it will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks potentially.
Okay.
And it's that range, at least 2 weeks, maybe up to 4 weeks. And also, the court has made a decision, because of the exposure to the media, making sure that the jurors are not exposed to the media, that the jury will be sequestered, which is, you're very limited in terms of your contact with the outside world.
Right.
And we realize that most people, they say, that wouldn't be a thing that they would vote for automatically. But the question is, would that present an insurmountable hardship to you? Is there something that just you couldn't do because of that?
Insurmountable, no, but it would be a major hassle to my life, yes.
Okay. And we realize it's a major hassle to most people's life.
Yep.
The question is, and I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, but the question is, you have to tell us, and we realize it's a hassle, it's a disruption, as it is for everybody involved in the case, from the court to all sides. The question is it such a hassle that you're not going to be able to pay attention, and it would just completely interfere with you being able to sit as a juror, and you're going to resent it, and you're going to take it out on the state, or you're going to take it out on defense, or you're going to take it out on who knows?
I would do my best not to, but I actually just got promoted at work literally the day before my summons came in, and as an assistant manager where I work, it would be a major hassle to my job because we've had a lot of trouble making sure that my shifts are covered this week.
Yes, sir. Now, by law, the judge, they can't, your employer cannot retaliate against you by law. But I don't want to mention in terms of where you work because I have it written down there, but we're trying to keep that from the public domain right now. I guess what I'm asking you, and only you would know, is having now broached the subject, do you think it would be such a hardship that you just cannot serve, and you just can't do it?
No, it would not be.
Okay. I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. West.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Don West. I'm one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman along with Mark O'Mara. Can you see Mr. Zimmerman over here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. The questions I have for you this morning are in the same arena or area, and that is, I don't know if you know this or not even, but this is not the only questioning that takes place. People that are being questioned like this are not being chosen or not chosen for the jury. This is one of what will be several phases. So that's why we're limiting questions sort of one-on-one just to the general area of pretrial publicity.
Sounds good.
Follow me on that?
Mm-hmm.
You can comment on anything that you want that you think would help us better understand your answer. But there will be other things that we would want to talk with you about later. Okay? So with that in mind, you said you work at a restaurant which gives you some exposure to news during the day?
Yes, sir.
Do you work during the day?
I work both in the day and the morning.
What's your
evening, I'm sorry.
What's your schedule like?
It depends. As an assistant manager, I work both shifts to make sure that at various times during the week, if someone can't work, then there is someone there with authority in the store. So I open, I close, I work mid-shifts. It varies from week to week.
Is it likely that in the course of a week you might work several different shifts?
Yes, sir.
And is there a television that's on at work
Yes.
that you can hear?
Here, no, but there is the closed captioning is on, and it is up in the lobby. Yes.
Can you see it from where you are in the
Yes.
restaurant? Okay. If something newsworthy comes on, do you have an opportunity to take a second and look at the TV?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I suppose if a customer is in there talking about current events, it could involve you?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to customers. That's my job. So if they have something to say about anything at all, an opinion about this case or a different one, then, I may hear it, I may not. Depends on if it gets retained in my mind or not.
Oh, sure.
I deal with hundreds of customers daily, so.
Have you been working in this capacity with these kinds of irregular shifts since February of 2012?
Not since February, no.
What were you? How were you employed, and what hours back in February of 2012?
In February, I was unemployed at the time. So I started working here back in October. So between February and October, I was unemployed, but my news coverage would have been about the same.
Tell me about that.
It's sparse. I personally don't really watch much of the news because I find it mostly depressing. So I try not to keep up too much because, there's a lot of things going on in the world that it doesn't really affect me too much, so I try not to keep up on it.
Is this one of those cases that's a bit depressing?
Slightly, I would say, yeah.
Why is that?
I mean, Mr. Martin is not here today. That's a sad fact.
Of course, the loss
For
of
anyone,
life
yes.
life is precious, is it not?
Absolutely.
Is that what strikes you as the most powerful point of this?
No. Not particularly.
How do you feel about Mr. Zimmerman's situation?
I mean, he's in almost a worse situation right now. He's stuck here until he's found innocent or guilty, so unfortunately he's at the whim of the people that are chosen for the jury and what they decide.
Based upon what you've heard in the news, do you think that maybe this Trayvon Martin's death was in self-defense?
I'm not really sure. I haven't seen enough of the coverage to have fully made my personal opinion about that.
Agreed. And you could never make a fully formed judgment until you've seen all of the available evidence.
Absolutely.
Yes. But really what I'm talking about now is just what you know as of today from media, which includes information from family and friends and Facebook and all of the sources of how stuff about this case has come to you.
Yes, sir.
So just considering that, what do you think? Do you think George Zimmerman might be innocent?
Objection, again, is to the ultimate decision.
Can you rephrase your question, please?
Based upon all things you've heard about the case, do you think that George Zimmerman could be innocent?
I couldn't form an opinion on that based on family, friends, and media. I've heard various reports from various people, and I haven't heard a lot of it, so I try to reserve my judgment for when I've heard everything.
So based upon the information and the way it has resonated with you, you don't think he could be innocent?
I'm not sure.
That sort of sounds like, in order to change your mind, the defense would have to convince you that he's innocent.
Perhaps I could see how that could come out that way, yes.
The way you see the case now is that he's more likely guilty than innocent.
Objection is to interjecting his opinion as to what this juror has said or not said.
This is for what he may have developed an opinion based upon what he knows from pretrial publicity. The other areas of questioning would be proper for regular voir dire, so you may proceed in that regard.
Right, that's all I'm talking about, is how you feel based upon what you know so far.
I don't have a fully formed opinion. That is how I feel.
Right. No, I don't want you to think that I'm arguing with you. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do, maybe not so well, is figuring out how you feel now based upon what you've learned about the case.
I would say it's an unfortunate circumstance that we're even here today, obviously, because of the loss of life and his life being uprooted the way that it has been just from having to be here, obviously. I don't have an opinion as to whether or not he is guilty or innocent because I don't like to make those opinions based off of what I've heard and hearsay and all of those types of things.
But if you did, so let's not talk about anything that you don't know from publicity. Let's talk just about what you've learned from TV, from any other sources, including family and friends or whatever. And what is your opinion today about that based upon that source of information?
I'm going to object to ask and answer.
We'll let him answer one more time, and then we'll move on.
My opinion is that I don't have one very particularly about whether or not he's innocent or guilty. Based on what I've heard and what I've seen sparingly on television. That's what we're here to decide, isn't it?
Yes, without question, the jurors that are selected will be asked to make that decision. So, but you're not being asked to make that decision now.
Correct.
Because truth of the matter is you haven't heard any evidence at all.
Not really, no. Nothing that has been said in a court of law, so nothing that would really make any sense. The things that they say on the media aren't always true. The evidence hasn't really been heard yet. Mm-hmm. So forming an opinion on something that you heard on the news is a little bit unruly.
All right. So I guess what I want to know is what opinion have you formed about the case based upon what you've heard in the news?
Objection. Asked and answered.
You've heard that 3 times already. He has said he hasn't formed an opinion, so please ask another one.
The juror is not going to answer that question.
He's answered it either 3 or 4 times already.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that this has turned into a back and forth.
It's fine.
Have family or friends expressed opinions to you?
A couple have expressed their feelings on the case, yes.
A couple of family or friends?
Both.
Okay, let's talk about friends first. In what context would your friends have expressed an opinion to you?
Mostly, have you heard about this? Have you seen that? A lot of my friends live in the area, so they too were affected by, things that shut down the city, rallies and things that closed streets that we may have gone to normally. So,
all right, give me an example of a conversation, a typical conversation with a friend that comes to mind.
Oh, we like to go to dinner often, so coming over to this side of town was difficult during some of the rallies because streets were cut off that we couldn't get to. So, it would be, do you want to go to dinner? Well, we can't go over there because, those streets aren't open, so it'll be difficult to get over there, so we go over here instead.
Was there a conversation then about the rallies causing you some inconvenience? Is that what?
Not really, no. There's always another restaurant to go to.
Oh, sure. But what I'm trying to understand, I thought you had said that a friend would say, have you heard about this?
Yeah, like, have you heard about the rally going on in Sanford? Not necessarily even what it was about or, what was going on with it. Just, have you heard about it? Have you tried to go over there? How bad is the traffic? Things like that.
Okay. Sort of not so much about what was going on.
Correct.
Factually, as much as whether it would affect your ability to get to where you were going or something like that.
Something that would impact my daily life.
Sure. Okay. That's that kind of conversation. Have you had any conversations with friends about the circumstances of the shooting that were on TV or that you knew about?
Not particularly, no. My friends don't keep up on the news that much either. It's not something that impacts us often.
Is there any conversation you had with any friend about the events surrounding the shooting?
Not this shooting, no.
I'm sorry?
Not this one, no. At the time, I do believe the Casey Anthony case was pretty big. That was something we talked about more than anything else. Some of the other events that were going on nationally or perhaps tragedies that were going on around the globe. Things that have large impacts, not such minor ones.
So you didn't have any conversation with any friends about the events surrounding the shooting?
Not really, no.
How about with... when you say not really, that's a phrase that catches my ear. You may not mean anything by it.
No, we never really discussed it in detail or, not even really names were mentioned. It was more like, did you hear about the shooting in Sanford? Yes, no, that was it.
And that would be the full extent of the conversation?
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm sorry, not really and pretty much sort of means the same thing to
My
me.
friends and I don't talk about things like that. It's not something that we really, not to mean any offense to anyone, it's not something we really care about. Mm-hmm. It's not something I'd keep up with on my daily life. I go to work, I try and occupy my time, I take care of my dogs and my family, and that's about it. I don't really pay attention to small-scale news in the local area other than you're going to have trouble driving on these streets to go wherever you're going. It doesn't impact my life that much, so I don't care. Tragedies in other countries affect my life.
Can you give me an example of the kind of story that you would really pay attention to?
Something like a tsunami in Japan or an earthquake in India. Something where I might have family or friends that are visiting that I need to make sure they're okay.
I got you. Okay. It's really a huge global impact.
Yes, something that would affect my life personally, not something like this. I would have heard if it had affected my life personally long before the news would have covered it.
From your perspective, this case is really just sort of a local story?
It isn't anymore. I know that it's been covered on CNN and other national and international news sources. But other than that, for me personally, no, it's nothing more than a local story.
How about conversations with family? Well, have we covered conversations with friends, anything to do with this case?
For the most part, yes. That would be your decision if we've covered it enough.
So not really, pretty much, and for the most part, are really challenges for me, because I don't know if there's more there that you haven't told me, or if you're basically saying, yeah, that's it.
There is nothing else that I have particularly to say about it, but you're the one with the questions, sir.
Of course. And again, I apologize. But I do want to, what's the expression, drill down enough that everything that you know about the case, even categorically, is something that we've talked about. Have we covered friends?
Yes.
All right. Let's move to family.
Okay.
Tell me what, if any, conversations you've had by any method in connection with the case.
I mean, almost all of my family has heard about it because it has been covered. A lot of my family lives up in the north, and they've called me and asked me, and my sister knew I had jury duty around the time that this case was going to trial for jury, so I have heard, bits and pieces, but never too much of an opinion from anyone, no.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Did you have any conversations with family members about this case before you knew you could be called for the jury?
Not really, no. Nothing more than something that might have been in passing. That thing's happening over in Sanford, do you know what it's about? And I really don't, so I would tell them I didn't know much about it.
So if a family member, maybe from out of state, realized that the shooting and any other community reaction events were taking place basically in your backyard, they would ask you about it?
Absolutely, yeah. They would, ask me, how I was doing and, if it impacted my life in any way, because they know I live in the area, but not how close or how far necessarily, because they don't live here.
Were you able to summarize for them basically what you thought had happened and how it might have affected you?
I'm certain at the time I had something to say, but usually just to get it out of the way, to get the topic off discussion.
Why would you want to do that?
It wasn't something to talk about necessarily. There's always something better to talk about than the news. The news is depressing, especially something like this. I don't want to. It's not something I like to discuss. I'm a very happy person.
You're not the first juror that said they don't like the news because it's so depressing.
I can imagine.
Sure. So the conversations you're talking about now with family members, would that be through social media?
Some through social media or phone conversations, Facebook, Twitter, text messages, stuff like that.
Through your Twitter account?
Yes, sir.
And through your Facebook account?
Yes, sir.
And can you give me a time frame? Was this around the time these events were taking place?
Probably closer to when they happened than, maybe towards the middle of the situation from where we are now.
I think you said you became re-employed in October?
Yes, sir.
Using that as kind of a before October, after October. Do you think you had any conversations with family members about this case after October? After
October, no. Probably not until recently, and it wasn't anything other than you have jury duty coming up. I heard about that. Mm-hmm. Nothing as far as, you're probably on that case, but I know you have jury duty coming up. When is the Zimmerman case coming up? Something along those lines.
Did you have any conversation with any family member or any friend within the last couple of months about the facts of the case or any information regarding what the case was about?
No, sir.
Your source of news at home is mostly Channel 13?
Yes, sir.
Are sometimes you at home during the day if you're working a night shift?
Yeah, I'll be home in the morning.
And would you usually put Channel 13 on?
No, not really. It would be something I would put on maybe for a few minutes here and there, and then I might switch to something else, typically like ESPN or maybe a baseball game or something that was on.
Do you ever leave Channel 13 on in the background?
I haven't before, yes.
Okay. With that, has there been any time in the last year or so where you remember a proceeding connected with this case being on TV?
Most of the time, if I leave it on, even as background noise, I might mute it if I'm doing something or listening to music or something like that. So if they were talking about something in particular, I may not even hear about it.
So when you put on the news in the morning on Channel 13, you mute the sound so you can't hear what's being said?
Correct.
So the only news you would get, I guess, in that situation would be what is bannered across the bottom?
Yeah, maybe the headlines that run across the bottom or something along those lines, yes, sir.
Do you use closed captioning?
At my house, no, but at work, yes.
And does Channel 13 play at work? Is that one of the stations available?
It is, but that's not what we have on the televisions usually.
Is that for any particular reason?
Usually our customers are more in tune with national news, so it's usually like CNN or Fox or one of those larger affiliates, not so much local.
Okay. Do you get to pick the station?
No. The district manager has decided what television plays what, and that's that.
Mm-hmm. Have you, when you're working an evening shift, for example, have you noticed any reports or shows maybe summarizing what's happened in the case up till then, or what's going on right now?
Not particularly, no.
Anything at all you can think of?
No.
Where you might have said, oh, that's where they are in the process?
No, not really.
Should I assume if you say not really, that means no?
Yes.
So you haven't heard any newscast, even in the evening, that may have summarized what's going on in the case?
No.
You know, it's perfectly okay that you did. No one's questioning that.
It's not something that I would have caught, no. Maybe once in a while I might have seen it or heard it, but it wouldn't have been something I would have absolutely heard and remembered for the rest of my life or even for the next couple of months.
Sure.
I might have been like, oh, look at that, and just walked away, because when I'm working, I am working. There's a lot of things that need to get done, cleaned, and stocked, so I don't have a lot of time.
I guess the buck stops with you, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you say are the three things about this case that do stand out, that you do specifically remember about this case?
That it would be Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Martin, and that there was a shooting involved. Other than that, as far as the particulars, I'm not fully aware of them.
Did you ever see any photographs connected with the case on
No, sir.
On TV?
No, sir.
Not one ever?
Ever? That's a long time, so I'm sure I've seen at least one, but nothing, as I said to him before, nothing that I would remember in particular that pops out in my head right now, even as you mention it.
Is there any image connected with the case that comes to mind?
Just Mr. Zimmerman's face, as it's been plastered over lots of news and newspapers and things like that.
And I apologize if you have already said this, but do you remember anything about that picture?
It was just a picture of his face, just as it is right now.
Sort of like just a portrait
Kind of,
style,
yes.
as opposed to an evidence style?
You could say that, yes.
How about, and that's the only picture you can ever remember seeing?
That's the most prominent one that I've seen, yeah. I don't remember many of the other ones, anything about them even.
Well, can you remember any of the other ones?
No, sir.
So the only picture about
Yes.
this case you can remember is a picture of Mr. Zimmerman looking about like he looks today?
Yes, sir.
How about Trayvon Martin? Do you remember any pictures of Trayvon Martin that you've seen anywhere?
Perhaps in passing, but nothing in particular. Nothing that sticks out in my brain, really.
Is there any picture of Trayvon Martin that you can describe for us?
I know that he was a young black male, and I think that's probably about as far as I could get.
You don't remember any pictures of him where you could identify an article of clothing or a facial expression or a background or anything at all?
No, sir.
You do have a clear memory, as I hear what you're saying, of some rallies.
Yes, sir.
What was your impression about why the rallies were being held?
I wasn't really sure why they were being held. I knew it was involved somewhat indirectly or directly with the shooting that had happened in the Sanford area, but I didn't really think much of it. It was clearly something that was of some significance considering the personnel that had attended, such as Al Sharpton, and I think someone else came that I don't remember.
What did you think? What did you think about the rallies and why a large group of people were assembled?
I didn't, other than the fact that it was, happening in my area and deterred me from coming over in this area as far as going to restaurants and stuff because of roads and stuff like that.
Do you know if the rallies you're thinking of were held before or after Mr. Zimmerman was arrested?
I do not remember now.
You mentioned conversations with family members in other states. Is that just your sister you're talking about?
I have a grandfather and aunts and uncles as well. Not many of them have talked about the case, and some of them I don't even speak to that often. But they have mentioned it occasionally in passing, I'm sure.
Any of those conversations ever include the rallies?
No, not really. Other than, does it impact, what you're doing on your daily basis?
And no one in your family has expressed an opinion to you about what they think of the case?
No, my family's usually pretty open-minded for stuff. The evidence needs to be out there, not just what you're hearing in the news. They need to hear everything before they try and form much of an opinion.
And I think, as you do, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
But my question, though, is have they expressed any opinions to you? Could you estimate for me how many times altogether you've read or heard something or seen something or talked to anybody about the case?
At least several, yeah. An estimate of an exact number? No, I couldn't.
No, just ballpark, just best guess.
Maybe 15, 20 times, I'm sure. It's been a long time since the beginning of, when last February and now, so things get talked about often, especially in the beginning of that situation in Sanford.
Ever talked to anyone who said they think that George Zimmerman is innocent?
I'm sure that I have, dealing with almost 500 customers every day. I'm sure that I've heard at least a few people say that. As far as who has said it and what they said, I have absolutely no idea.
Ever hear anybody say to you that they think George Zimmerman's guilty?
No, in the same regard. I'm sure that I have, but I deal with a lot of people every day. I don't have that much time to remember everything they have to say. Typically, I remember their orders.
Of course, that's job one.
Yep.
Would you have any sense, since you're sort of a one-person polling system, where the divide was in your store?
No, I don't have any idea. It's not something that gets talked about at work very often. I try and keep my employees pretty busy. They shouldn't be watching televisions.
Of course.
At work, at least.
Are you saying you really haven't talked to any of the co-workers or employees about the case?
No, not really.
Not at all?
No.
Never?
Not once that I can remember, no.
Okay. And the contact you had then about the case at work would have come from the customers?
Yeah, mostly.
Okay. If you haven't talked to any...
Well, there's other people that come in the store besides coworkers and customers. There are service people that service my machines. Those are also people that come in my store that they may have voiced something about it as well. I couldn't tell you the truth.
All right. no conversation with coworkers, but you may have talked to vendors or distributors,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Putting that group in, did you ever have a detailed conversation about the case
No.
with anyone,
No.
including those folks? And how about the customers overall? I know you can't remember many, if any, specific conversations, but would you say there's been a lot or a few over the last
It would be
year?
on the lower numbers. Most people don't really know much about it, and it's not something they would talk about on a daily basis. I deal with a lot of businessmen and people that work for engineering firms, and they don't really care.
And what's your sense of it from talking to the folks that came into your store that may have expressed an opinion or made a comment?
I would say it's probably fairly divided.
About the same number of people on each side of the issue?
Yeah.
Anybody make comment to you, or do you have any feelings about whether race played a part in this case?
No one's really mentioned that, nor do I have an opinion on that.
Do you think the rallies that you talked about, do you think the rallies had anything to do with the racial aspect of this case?
No, sir.
You have just 1 minute.
You'll still remain seated, and counsel, when you're ready, approach. If you, sir, will follow Deputy Jarvis, and we'll be with you again shortly. And can we bring in our next juror?
Your Honor, G63 is correct.
Please be seated. Good morning. We are referring to you, and will continue to do so, as Juror G63. The attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out on Tuesday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be asking a series of questions just limited to pretrial publicity, what exposure you may have been exposed to.
Okay.
You can remain seated. I've got on here that when you filled out the questionnaire, you said, do not remember the source, but most likely television. Is that correct in terms of what exposure you had?
Yeah, television.
Okay. And what you've notated here in terms that you remember when you were asked to briefly write out what you heard, that there was a shooting in a residential neighborhood that resulted in Martin's death. The defendant, Zimmerman, claimed this was done in self-defense.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about TV. Was it local or national or a combination?
I don't remember. I mean, I haven't. This was, I guess, a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever it was.
It happened back in February of last year.
Okay, yeah, it must have been around that. I haven't heard anything since then, so I don't remember. I couldn't tell you where I heard anything.
Okay. Would your memory of, or your recollection of when this was broadcast on TV, was that back at the time it happened, you're saying, and not recently?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you recall the source of the TV in terms of what channel at all? Or?
No. I don't watch any television news regularly, so it's often my parents live near me, and I'll often visit them, and they might have something on, but there's nothing I pay attention to regularly, so I couldn't tell you like where I saw anything.
Okay. So you may have, while your parents' house or elsewhere, you may have glanced at it, but you weren't like listening to it on a regular basis. Is that my understanding, or?
Correct. I mean, if something came up, then I paid attention, but I really didn't.
Okay. And how about on the internet? Did you do any searching on the internet about this case at all at any time?
Some at the time.
Okay. Tell me, if you could, what was your source on the internet? Did you go to Google, Yahoo, Facebook, or?
Usually the way I get most of my news is actually Facebook, and whatever shows up on my news feed, I might click on it if it's interesting.
Okay. And would that have been true back in last year and then through now?
Yeah.
Okay. When articles or feeds, I guess when you refer to them, when they appeared on Facebook, is it called feeds? Or?
Yeah, it's called the news feed, I think. I think I still called it that.
All right. News feed, whenever it appeared, would you pull up the story and kind of read about it or just glance at it? Or I guess my question is, did you just look at it or glance at it, or did you then do further research on it as a result of looking at it?
I think what I usually did, I might click on an article and might read it, but there wasn't something that I cared about enough to...
You weren't obsessed with it?
No.
Okay. Did you, and does Facebook, every time you pull it up, do they populate the site or whatever with news feeds on a regular basis, or is that something you have to go to? Tell me a little bit about how Facebook works, Mike.
Sure. Okay. Well, Facebook, basically, when you log in, there's a main page, and it's a whole... It's sort of a conglomeration of a bunch of different things. So it's things that friends posted. If you subscribe to pages from organizations or businesses, then you might see things that they've posted. So it's really just a whole mess of things.
Okay.
And it's not.
My question is, the news feed. Do you have to? Is that something you have to click on in order to pull up, or does it just start populating at the site?
Well, first I want to be clear. It's not strictly news. It's not strictly for news.
Okay.
It's just anything that anybody's posted, and news is just a word they use. It doesn't actually mean this is local news, it's national news.
Gotcha.
But I guess it's the first page you see when you log in.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, you do have to log into the site in order to see this.
Gotcha.
But other than that, it's first page.
And so you would then have somebody, a friend or whatever, would post on there something about the story about this case, and then you would pull it up. Is there commentary that follows that? Is what I'm asking, I guess.
Well, I guess there's a comments under individual posts. There are comments, and also if you click on the article, often there'll be comments on the article from other people.
Sure. Okay. And when you get on Facebook and you did that, did you look through a lot of those comments, or did you just glance at them?
I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Okay.
I couldn't, like I said, this is so long ago, I couldn't tell you.
Sure. Okay. Anything else come to mind as a result of going through that Facebook process where you may have seen comments about the case? Do you recall the comments, whether they were favorable to Mr. Martin or favorable to Mr. Zimmerman, or a combination, or...
I think at the time, if there were comments, it always seemed to go back to like general, like gun law and stuff like that. And that's just been a thing that's been happening in a lot of different cases. So it's sort of, because of general discussion, I don't remember what else was happening at the time.
Okay.
But
did as a result of that, did you form any impressions when you came across that, in terms of the gun laws and all that, and just in terms of the impact it had on you in terms of seeing that?
Well, I don't think. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay, let me make sure you understand, because we may at a certain time also ask you additional questions. I'm talking about just in terms of the exposure to the media related to this case. Anything specific about the case in terms of guns, other than guns? Was there any, in terms of how the shooting occurred or anything like that?
Oh, well, I mean, I know a gun was involved, and there was something to do with some kind of stand your ground law.
Okay.
I guess that's a thing in Florida that they have.
Okay.
But I don't know any other details about.
Any discussion, I guess, about how Mr. Martin came into contact with Mr. Zimmerman?
Oh, what do you mean? Like,
in terms of how it happened, how the shooting happened?
Oh,
do you remember any details about
whatever
that?
events might have happened? No, I don't.
Okay. All right. How about in terms of stand your ground? Do you remember anything other than there was something about stand your ground? Do you remember?
I remember there was something specific about the Florida law being weird.
Okay.
I've heard of something called the Castle Doctrine.
Okay.
But I thought I heard something about the Florida law being different from, like, some states have it some way, some states have another way.
Okay. How long have you lived in Seminole County? And the reason I ask is I'm just trying. You mentioned that Florida law versus other. Did you used to live somewhere else and just recently moved here? Or did you grow up here?
I've always lived in Florida. I moved to Seminole County, I guess, 5 years ago.
Okay.
Years ago,
I apologize. I was thinking you had recently moved.
Oh no.
Okay. Other than at the very beginning, did you keep up with the case in terms of court proceedings that were occurring?
I didn't have any idea what the court proceedings were.
Okay. So you haven't paid any attention in terms of the physical evidence, if there is any, whether there's photographs or other type items. Have you looked at it? Have you seen any of those photographs just in passing?
No.
You don't remember? Nothing comes to mind?
I didn't see anything.
Okay. All right. Okay. And how about in terms of your exposure on TV? Do you recall any photographs at all on TV about the case?
I must have seen something, but not that I remember.
Okay. And how about anything to do with any recordings or anything like that? Okay.
Actually, no. I heard there was a 911 call.
Okay.
But I don't think I ever heard it.
Okay. You got your jury summons, 3-4 weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. Did you then do some research to see maybe what case you're going to be on at all? In terms of you were supposed to report on June 10th. Did you do any research about what type of case you might be on?
Well, actually, I heard it. I first heard it from my dad, who checked my mail, I guess, that day, because he'd come by, and he told me, "Oh, well, you've gotten a summons, and well, this trial is happening now." And I didn't even know this trial was going to happen. So but I mean, I found out of the summons the same time that I found out that there was a trial.
Okay.
This trial.
Sure. So you heard that it was from your dad that it was possibly the George Zimmerman trial, or the George Zimmerman trial was happening at the same time. Did you then, let me go find out about George Zimmerman, let me go find out about Trayvon Martin?
No, as soon as I read it, I was like, oh, well, I shouldn't look up anything else.
Okay, so you made a conscious decision not to look at anything else.
Yeah, it's multiple times. Like, since I visited my parents in the past few weeks, and, again, this trial has come on the news, and immediately I say, I don't want to hear about it.
Okay. Was that on purpose so that you wanted to potentially be on the jury, or?
Well, I mean, if I'm asked to do this, it said specifically, like, don't stay away from.
The summons said stay away from the media.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know the judges admonish you, but you believe the summons.
Oh, this is before. I thought the summons said.
Okay. Now, you said something about self-defense in your notes here, or your written statement as to what you recall. What did you hear about self-defense?
I heard that the defendant's claim was that this shooting was done in self-defense.
Okay. Is that what you got from the news or from somewhere?
I have no idea where I heard that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason is that you've mentioned stand your ground, and now you've mentioned self-defense. Do you think you read them out of the same article or different articles, or do you recall?
I don't know. I heard that stand your ground was the self-defense law.
Okay. Do you remember reading or watching any kind of commentary by lawyers on the case? And here's what I'm getting at. Sometimes the news is just straight news, car accident on 3rd Street, and then there's car accident on 3rd Street. But what happened really is, and either the newscaster interjects themselves, or there's people commenting about how the car accident happened, and what that means. Do you recall any commentary about from either attorneys on the case or attorneys in the national level or local level commenting about the case, or other people, so-called experts, talking about the case?
I never heard. I don't think I heard anything about lawyers.
Okay.
There was. I might have seen speculation from people not knowing anything. Like I said, the comments section under an article. But I don't think I heard anybody who actually knows anything say anything.
What do you recall of some of the commentary or speculation about the case that people commented after an article?
Well, trying to think. I mean, if you could sort of, because I don't know, I have no idea how to jog my memory.
No, I understand. I'm not allowed to start telling you facts.
Yeah.
What we're trying to find out from you is what you remember. If you don't remember anything, that's fine. I'm just trying to prod your memory as best you can. Take a few seconds to kind of go back and what you remember about the case.
I think the problem here, I might remember something, but I don't remember that I remember it.
Okay.
Unless I have like some kind of memory trigger or something. So.
Let me see if I can give you some triggering without referring to the case. You remember photographs at all related to the case? Or description or commentary?
I think I saw photographs of the people involved.
Okay, tell me about that. What do you remember about photographs?
They were just standard photos. I don't think they weren't photos of events.
Okay. Photos, do you remember the particular people involved? Did it mention Mr. Zimmerman or did it mention Mr. Trayvon Martin or the attorneys involved or other people, police or whatever?
I'm sorry. The last question is...
Okay. My question is, you mentioned that the photographs, and they weren't of the event itself, but do you remember people? You said some photographs of people. Do you remember who the people were?
Well, I know I saw photos of the deceased. I saw photos of the shooter.
Okay. So you saw photos of Mr. Zimmerman and of the deceased. Okay. Mm-hmm. What photo? Do you remember the photo right now? If you could tell me the description of what the photo of the deceased, Mr. Martin, and that's all. Obviously, you were referred to on the questionnaire. But what photograph do you remember seeing of him, or photos of him?
I don't know what you mean. I mean, like I said, it's just a photo.
Was it a photograph just of the face? Was Mr. Martin doing something? What kind of attire do you remember him wearing? Okay, nothing?
I mean, nothing.
Okay. How about of Mr. Zimmerman?
Again, nothing that stood out, I guess.
All right.
Something that I remember.
Sure. How about, in addition to the TV station and then internet, Facebook, mm-hmm. any other sources maybe of coming across information?
Those are, I don't see any other media at all, okay. I think.
All right. Let's talk about, I apologize, I interrupted you.
I don't get my news from any other sources, really.
All right. Let's talk about, you mentioned your dad. Any conversations with your dad other than him telling you got a summons for jury selection, for jury duty? Anything about commenting as the case was going on back in February or throughout about the case? If he watches the TV and kind of gives you, hey, today they're doing this or today this happened in court. Any kind of commentary by your dad about the case?
Well, he's generally a person who doesn't like any kind of trials in the news, so...
Okay. How about other family members? Have they talked to you about the case?
Nothing that... yes, the fact that it happened.
Sure. Okay.
But I don't think it was ever like a topic of discussion,
okay.
Like a serious...
Okay.
Until it became to the point where now I'm in the jury selection, asking questions, what does that involve? And I can't tell you anything.
Okay. How about with friends? Any discussions with friends? Sometimes with friends you have disputes, or maybe two friends are taking different sides. One is in favor of Zimmerman, one is in favor of Martin, and they have a discussion, and you might hear something being discussed at all. Do you recall any kind of friends talking about the case, or?
I'm surprised because I don't think there was anything. It seems that the debates that I have with friends are usually more like political stuff.
Okay.
So,
was there any discussion of this case being a political case at all by anybody that you can remember?
Well, I guess how it relates to like what kind of gun law.
Okay. Well, tell me as best you can recall what discussions there were in relation to this case.
I don't think there was anything specific about this case.
Okay.
Except it seems like every time there's some case involving a gun, that there are people like, we should have more guns or we should have fewer guns, and it doesn't seem to be much anything more interesting than that.
anything about, not necessarily the facts of the case, but anything related to the case that you recall from media exposure or friends or other people talking about in terms of the city or anything like that?
I remember there was a scandal actually involving somebody in the high levels in the justice system. I don't know, in Seminole County, who was fired for mishandling the case.
Okay, tell me what you recall about that.
I think Zimmerman wasn't immediately arrested or something,
okay.
And there were like, I guess there were people protesting this.
Okay.
And as a result of this not happening, like somebody lost their job or they resigned.
Okay. Do you remember who that was?
No idea.
Okay.
I don't even know what kind of positions they're.
Okay. What do you remember? You mentioned Mr. Zimmerman not being arrested. Anything more than what you've mentioned already?
I think there were accusations of racism.
Okay.
By actually, I guess some police force.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's the Seminole County system or somebody, and that was somehow a factor in them not making an arrest right away.
And do you recall who was making those allegations?
No, I mean, it seems like they're the same kind of people who protest everything.
Okay, all right.
So,
and tell me about the protests. What you recall about the protests?
All I know is there were protests.
Okay, how did you feel about that?
I don't think, like I said, it seems like there are always protests related to this. I don't think it seemed anything.
Okay. You mentioned it's the same type of people that do the protests. You're referring to can you elaborate a little bit about that?
It seems that whenever there's some kind of a sorry, I'm trying to get it.
Take your time.
It seems like when there's some kind of a case where somebody's accused of something and people don't know, I don't know how to describe this. It just seems as if it's the same people seem to be complaining about everything every single time there's something controversial.
Okay. And are you talking about in terms of? I know you referenced to this case, but you're talking about these same people complain about everything related to anything that happens in the world or in the United States, or is there a particular subject matter that causes those people to complain?
Well, I think there are many people who seem to think that the justice system doesn't do stuff properly.
Okay. And how would you describe those people? How would you, I guess, categorize, if you can, who those people are? We keep referring to people. Who are they? I guess, are they citizens? Who are these individuals? Is there a faction, or is it like a group?
I couldn't identify a faction. I mean, honestly, just in the jury room, the waiting room where I was just now with maybe a dozen other people, people were talking about how money isn't being spent by the government on the right things, and we're spending too much money on wars and not enough money on helping people.
Okay.
And to me, it seems like they're speaking from not really understanding the details and realizing, we have to account for it.
So are you saying, when you say people, you're talking about people that are uninformed as to what really happened or not? Or? No,
what I'm saying, I think there are people who tend to accuse people of not doing something properly without realizing that it's difficult to do those things properly.
Okay. And by the way, when you said you're not talking about discussing facts of the case, you're talking about...
No, I'm talking about government in general.
Okay. All right. Let me me prod you a little bit more about that in terms of what you remember in terms of commentary or discussions about protests. Did you watch any of those protests? You didn't go live?
I had no firsthand knowledge. I didn't know.
Too.
Well, come to think of it, I think there are people protesting like up against each other.
Okay.
I don't like any of them.
Okay. All right. Did that cause you to take a side in one way or the other related to this case?
I don't think it's. I think it's similar to people. Well, protesting that we have too many taxes and protesting that there aren't enough benefits, and it seems to me they're basically going against each other in a way that you can't. They can't both be right.
Okay. And I know you stated your ultimate opinion is that you can be fair in terms of you have not formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't think I know enough.
Okay. So when you say you think so, you can unequivocally say at this time that you have not formed an opinion, or are you vacillating as to that?
What is that word?
Are you vacillating? Are you unsure? Are you on the fence? Or
about
it seems at this time in terms of forming an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant? Or
are you asking if I'm unsure about whether I have an opinion?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that I don't.
You're sure your opinion?
Yeah.
And is your opinion firm? Is what I'm saying, or is it one that you're on the fence that you may be? In other words. Here's what we're trying to figure out for both sides. I'm trying to determine whether you can be fair to the defendant and to the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. So my question is, have you formed an opinion right now as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Is there any dispute in your mind about that?
No.
Okay. Would what I've tried to prod from you right now in terms of what commentary you've read about or heard about, mm-hmm. Would that sway you in one way or the other to favor one side or the other?
You mean
commentary? You said you mentioned protests. From what I understand, you don't particularly think protests are a good thing, right?
I'm not. I think protests should be allowed to happen.
You're not a fan of them.
I think that people who are protesting often. I think they're speaking out of not knowing.
Sure. Here's my question.
Having good understanding.
You get on the jury.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to the evidence. You hear a witness say whatever. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh, okay, so now I understand that protests were really in favor of Trayvon Martin or they were in favor of George Zimmerman. Either side. Okay, now's my time to get back. And you're going to vote one way or the other because you related back to, you perceived that the protests were in relation to something about the case, one way or the other, and now's my time to get back at. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, if I wanted to make a decision based on that, I don't see, like I said, if there are protesters on both sides. I don't think my dislike of either of them is greater. Here's
my question. Can you agree that whatever commentary you saw or read about, that you have to completely remove that from the process of determining whether this defendant is guilty or whether he's innocent? Can you agree with that?
I think I can, because I don't think it's not fresh in my mind.
Okay. Here's the problems that both sides are going to try to question you about is the issue is sometimes it's not fresh in your mind, but you're sitting as a juror. And let's say a crucial fact in this case was whether, and it's not, I'm making up a fact because I can't get the facts, whether the car involved was red or blue, right? Mm-hmm. And you hear from the witness stand, witness say the car was red, right? And then, we've asked you about it now, and you say, I don't know, I don't even know there was a car involved. But you're sitting there listening to the evidence, and you go, God, that witness said the car was red. I seem to have seen some post about the car being blue. There may have even been a story. Which one would you rely on? Would you remember about the car being blue, or what the witness said the car was red?
Well, I guess I would have to I would hear the witness, and maybe they're lying. I don't know, but I mean, that seems to me that's like what the job of the attorneys is to do.
If the witness says the car is red, and nobody else comes into court and says that there's a blue car, would you believe the witness is lying? Just because in the back of your memory that you had thought you had seen something about the car being blue?
No.
Okay.
No.
So do you understand that
but I wouldn't take that at face value either, but I don't think that would have anything to do with not having heard of a car in the news or whatever.
Okay. All right. In other words, can you agree to disregard anything about what you've read or seen in the news or commentary by anybody?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Do you recall any specific commentary by any attorneys about the case?
No.
One of the questions is whether you can, how long a term you can serve in terms of whether you can comply with the requirements. You know, we ask people to come from their everyday lives and jobs and citizens as jurors. And we realize it's a hardship, but the question is, you know, we've all agreed to, since we live in this great country, to abide by that. The question is, you're sitting as a juror, you're told, or you will be told, that the trial may last from anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and that you will be sequestered in terms of your contact to the outside world will be severely limited. Would that cause an insurmountable hardship to you?
Well, I'm unemployed right now anyway, so no.
Okay. I understand you're unemployed right now, but would that cause an undue hardship in terms of being able to have contact, you know, that would be severely limited?
No, I think I could, I guess I could take care of, as long as people know that I can't talk to them.
Okay.
So actually, that's news to me. So you're saying 2 to 4 weeks?
That is correct. The trial may last 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
We just want everybody to have knowledge of that. That's our estimate as best we can. But in other words, your life is going to be disrupted, but, you know, we realize everybody's life is going to be disrupted. I mean, it's part of the criminal justice and part of living in this great country. Any issues about that?
No.
Because now's the time to talk about it if there are. Okay.
I mean, my birthday's in that time, but I can move it. I can move a party back if I was, you know.
Okay. All right. All right. Give me a moment.
Yes, thank you. That's okay. Go right ahead. I was going to actually give you a couple of minutes anyway, so have a sip of water.
No, this is diluted by a factor of 10, and it's still making me.
Oh, it's caffeine?
It's coffee. It doesn't even count as coffee though.
All right. Did you have any idea before you came in here that we would be questioning you for a half hour or so?
I knew that something was going to happen, and I would be questioned by somebody for a half hour, an hour. But I had no idea. Walking into this room, I had no idea what I would encounter.
Okay.
Or who I would encounter.
All right. It's us. The purpose of this portion of it, as was mentioned, is though we need to do a lot of drilling into what you know about the case or that you don't know much. The reason why we do that is because with a case that has some notoriety, let me ask you, would you agree that this case has gotten a certain level of notoriety about it?
I think just from the fact that it seems to sort of solicit itself without me even seeking it out, like.
Right. It just seems to show up in lots of different places.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of that, and because there has been media coverage, we need to know what has fallen upon you and how you've absorbed it, and how that might impact on how you view the facts of the case. Okay? So that's why we're doing this. Do you understand that to be our purpose?
Yeah.
Okay. Within that, I have some questions about how that information got to you, and particularly how you absorbed it or reacted to it. But I want to ask you just a bit more about when you say it sort of presents itself. Tell me, not yet specifics about the media coverage, but just generally, how do you view the George Zimmerman case as you know it over the past 16 months? You mentioned a moment ago that it just sort of keeps showing up. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, there have been multiple times in the past few weeks, for example, that, like I said, I often visit my parents, and if they came up on the news, and having to avoid it, I guess.
Right.
Actually, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your question.
That's all right. No problem at all. Do you remember when the Boston Marathon bombing occurred? I'm not going to ask not the date but just do you remember the event?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And how that sort of we got absorbed in that for those few week period. Did that seem to occur in your mind?
It seemed, it was a topic, I guess, a trending topic, you could say.
Would you consider this event of the George Zimmerman case similar in that it has sort of taken focus of the country?
I think so.
Okay. Do you think it's done so and has caused some emotions to be carried along with the facts of what happened?
Emotions?
Have people become
on my part, or
no?
People that I know?
No. We're just talking generally the way the country, the community, the state has reacted to this event. Have you noticed it to be one where people have taken sides or gotten emotional about it? And I'm not. When I ask you that, I don't want you to think that you need to say yes because I'm asking you. If you haven't noticed, that's as good an answer.
It seems not among anybody that I know, but it seems like out in the real world there are some people who've gotten angry.
Okay.
And when I say the real world, it's because I think it seems like the people I spend my time with just seem biased in the sense that there are things that they don't talk about. There are things that don't come up in conversation, and there are other things that do come up in conversation. And when I hear people, when I hear people that I don't know, people like let's say protest groups or stuff like that, it seems like they often have a point of view that I don't have, and I don't even know anybody who has.
Okay. I'm going to try and give you my interpretation of what you said and tell me if it's close.
Okay.
You and those who you communicate with on maybe a daily basis, and does that include family and friends?
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. It's not an ongoing. This case is not an ongoing topic of conversation within that group of people. Is that close?
I guess what I'm saying. There seem to be, let's say there seem to be stereotypes. This is probably going off on a tangent, but maybe this can sort of convey what I'm trying. There's a stereotype of a bro. Just some kind of character, or let's say a hipster. It's another sort of character, idea, trope. I'm not sure what the word is, but that people sort of attach. They attach stereotypes to some kind of character.
Right.
An archetype, that's the word. And it seems that everybody sort of tends to think of these people as having a lot of traits, okay. And yet I don't know anybody that actually seems to fit these traits.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this.
According to my...
In the confines of this case, do you think, for example, and maybe this is what you're saying, but tell me if I'm wrong. Do you think, for example, that Trayvon Martin has been made an archetype of some movement or some philosophy that you don't see facts to support? And in the same sense, George Zimmerman may have been made some archetype of something. Is that what you're talking about as to this case? Or was that just
I don't think that either person has been cast as that. I'm just See, I forgot why I was trying to say that in the first place, but I think it's because there are people. It seems that people tend to make assumptions about sort of, I don't know, archetypes or maybe groups of people that to me don't seem to reflect reality.
Yeah, okay. Let me ask it this way, because you had said that you had at least a perspective or a concern on those people who were involved in the protests. Was I right that you sort of had a concern, or at least a perspective on that, on those people?
I guess, yeah, if you could say I'm like...
Okay.
I think it's not... Like, to me, it doesn't make sense to be a protester if I think they're doing something that doesn't really need to be done.
Right. Do you believe that there are some causes for which people can and should protest? Not related to this case, just generally speaking.
It's actually a question that I struggle with.
Okay.
Because, there's got to be something that's worth protesting over, but, the world's not perfect, but how do I identify what things I think ought to be changed to the point that I actually go out of my way to support a cause instead of,
Okay. Within the context of this case, you are aware that some people have decided that some elements of this case were worthy of protesting, or that they were worthy of congregating, that they were worthy of coming together. You understand that happened in this case?
Yes.
Okay.
I was under the impression. Well, I think the reason I brought up protests in the first place because I know that there were some kind of protests related to the arrest not taking place right away.
Okay. 2 points about that. First of all, do you think that those, whoever they may have been, is your thoughts about them that they were protesting such that you would hold it against them where you have an opportunity to be a juror in this case?
No, I think they're completely irrelevant.
Because really, though we could have some good philosophical discussions about the concept of social unrest and protesting, this is not the place for that. This is the place to make sure that if you sit here as a juror, whatever you heard from the outside world and what you bring to us today, that those experiences don't impact your ability to be a good, fair, and impartial juror. You understand that's the point of what we're talking?
Yeah, I think thinking these protesters are irrelevant sort of is a reason that I would never want to be one of them, because it doesn't seem to make sense as a person who would do that.
And for our purposes today, we want to make sure that, though you might not agree with the concept of anyone protesting, that you would not hold that against those who have decided to. That's really our concern.
Correct,
here.
because I know there, like I said, I think there has to be some causes that are worth protesting over. And if that's a poison they pick.
Okay. Have you made an independent decision in your own mind, based upon your knowledge of this case, that those who protested one way or the other were wrong to do so?
Well, to say that they're wrong, to me, I guess wrong in a sense that they can't be sure they're right.
No, okay, but not wrong ultimately. Wrong in your mind, because the next half of the question was going to be, and to the extent that you think they might have been wrong, would you hold that against them if the judge tells you it's not a relevant consideration? So, whether or not you think they're wrong, would you hold it against them?
You mean against the protesters?
Yes.
No.
Let's say that. Oh, okay. You would not hold it against them?
No.
Well, we're talking about protesting for just a moment, or the actual protest that occurred. Did you attend any of them? I think you said no.
Do you know anybody?
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
I didn't attend anything. Okay. If that's the answer.
Do you know anyone who did?
No.
Did you have any discussions with any other people about the protests or the demonstrations that were ongoing?
Not that I remember.
Okay.
I don't think any. I never heard from anybody who was involved in any of these protests, or who actually, who even considered going to one of them.
Okay. In the beginning of the questions by Mr. DeLorean, it said, I think my words, but I was trying to capture yours, that you don't watch anything about news. Is that accurate?
Well, usually when I do want news, it's national news or international news. But really, like I said, most of what I hear of the news is Facebook links, honestly. And that's not a very good way to do it, but most things that happen on the news don't affect me, unless, let's say, something to do with voting. But that's something that doesn't.
Something to do with voting?
Voting, yes.
Like politics?
Yeah, I mean, if something happens in the world that actually should affect the way I vote for something, then, I mean, that seems to be something that affects me in only a slight way. But otherwise, it doesn't seem like anything in the news affects me. I mean, even something like, I guess, the Boston Marathon bombing, honestly, that doesn't have any impact on my life. So, I mean, it might change the way other people, it might change people's attitudes, but I don't think.
Okay.
I mean, I hate to sort of lump a tragedy like that, because, I mean, you know how many people died, but into things that don't really concern me, but to me it is.
Okay.
I'm not.
And specific a bit more to this case, wherever you found a place for news, be it Facebook or anywhere else, I think Mr. DeLorean asked you about some specifics, and some of the stuff that you talked about included that this case involved the stand your ground law. Is that?
Yes.
Tell me your understanding of its connection to this case.
I've heard. I don't know if the stand your ground law applies. I heard speculation that it was somehow related to what happened, because if this is self-defense, then it would, I guess. Well, I don't know if the stand your ground law applies here. So,
and actually, you don't need to know that right now.
Okay.
And if it does, then whatever laws apply, the judge is going to instruct you. So not right now, but at the right time, she'll instruct you on what those laws might be. Okay. My question, though, is I want to know what you've heard in the media, and maybe even if it was from whatever source you heard about this concept of stand your ground and along with it self-defense. So let's focus on that for just a moment. Tell me, within the context of this case, what you heard about regarding any of those subjects: stand your ground, self-defense, castle doctrine.
I remember that I specifically looked up, I think, stand your ground laws like in the country.
Okay. May I interrupt you for a moment and ask you before you tell me that? Did you do that in relation to this case because this case had happened and that was a point of interest of yours?
I think I might have done it before that. I don't know.
Okay. Then I interrupted you. Go ahead and tell me what it was you found out.
Well, I read about the law. I mean, I'm generally interested in, like, sort of weird things in the law and, like, how exceptions are made for some things or other. But I know I've read some things, but I can't remember anything about the law.
Okay.
I don't remember what's special about Florida's law. I only know there is something that's kind of unusual about it.
Okay. Let me focus you a bit this way. Do you remember anything at all about that law that you may have researched or looked up that you can tell us about right now?
Not right now.
Okay. If, in fact, something comes to mind were you to possibly sit on the jury and the judge's instructions were different, she's going to give you the instructions. She's going to tell you what the law is and how to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
If your memory or understanding of the law was different than what the judge tells you,
oh, of course,
what would you do?
Well, of course, I would have to take the judge's
and if
into account.
And if facts that you recall, whether it be from the protests or the demonstrations or the picture that you mentioned seeing, if those facts were different than what you heard here in the courtroom, then which would you rely on?
It would have to be the courtroom. The standard ground law, I probably looked it up on Wikipedia, so I know that's not a reliable source. Whenever I look anything up, it's not usually, it's just out of curiosity. It's not something that I can take like as a reliable source if I actually want to make major decisions based on or something like that.
Okay. Your dad had told you that you'd gotten the summons, and yes. I think you said that based upon that you affirmatively decided not to look anything else up about this case?
Yes. I'm not sure. I think I said earlier that he told me not to look anything up, but I don't remember this is something I saw on the summons, because I read the summons, but I don't remember what was in it. Whether this is something he told me separately, because he's been on a jury before, or at least for jury duty.
Okay.
So, all I know is that, like, from that day, I consciously avoided any news relating to the trial.
Good. Can you tell us anything that you remember anyone such as your family or friends telling you about this case?
Nothing more than, I guess, what I've already said.
If I asked you for three things that you think were the most significant about this case that you remember here today, what would they be?
Interesting.
Don't think about it much. Just tell me the three things that come to the top of your head.
Gun law, self-defense law, and I'm trying to think of third.
It's okay. You remember two. That's all right.
I guess the fact that it happened in Florida. It seems all the weird news stories happen in Florida. Although, I don't think. To me, I think I was surprised to find out that it was in Florida later, or something like that.
Okay. At your last job, was it a job where you would interact with customers or the public at all? To the extent that you would have spoken to them about such matters as this case?
Well, actually, I haven't. My last job was as a teaching assistant, and since then I haven't. That was before. I think that was a year ago, and since then I haven't had a job.
Okay. You had mentioned in response to a question that part of this case that became apparent to you was that it involved racial issues. Just tell me a bit more about that, what you thought about this case. in regard to that?
I know there were accusations of racism, or racial issues being like something. But I think that seems to happen whenever there's a crime that involves somebody who's in a minority. It seems a lot of people just like throw the idea that racism was involved somehow into it, and it seems like it's happened to like every case that's involved anybody who wasn't white, to be honest.
With your background, did that fall on you any particular way or have any particular significance?
Personally?
Yeah.
I don't even identify as a race because I'm like very mixed race, so I don't.
So is this more than just sort of a societal issue of why are they saying it's a racial issue if it's not, or?
I tend to think that people who don't know what they're talking about tend to say, oh, there was racism involved in how the case was handled, but like how, let's say, what somebody's motivation was, and it seems that like racism doesn't actually seem to be like any kind of thing that I have to deal with in my day-to-day life. In my interactions with other people, it seems to never come up. But when, let's say, there's some kind of thing in a trial or something like that, or some kind of political thing, it seems that people already assume race is involved, and that's something that doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Would you be at all concerned if, as a juror on this case, we went through the entire case and the issue of race wasn't part of the evidence?
Well, if people are claiming it was, and I don't know who.
You have an understanding that there may be some racial overtones to this case. Is that accurate?
There might.
Okay.
But
my question is simply that let's just say that you were on the panel.
Mm-hmm.
We went through the whole trial, and the only evidence that you got was dealing with the facts of the case, what happened and under what circumstances, and that the issue of race was left out of the trial. Knowing that you think there may be some racial overtones to it.
Sorry, that's not something I think. That's accusations I've heard others make.
Right. With that, would you be concerned that you had not gotten any evidence of that in the trial or none presented? Would that cause you any concern, or would you just focus on the evidence you did get?
It wouldn't be a problem. Okay. I guess the assumption I have to make is that if something I thought might have been an issue but didn't come up,
right,
then that's because neither side thought it was something that was noteworthy.
Great. Let me just have a moment, if I might, Your Honor. Just to close up a touch, you had said that you would be able to listen to only the evidence that you hear, correct? The judge will instruct you to leave not your common sense, but the information that you said that you've heard about this case on the outside of the courtroom. Would you be able to do that?
I think so.
Okay. And you had mentioned as your racial makeup, you said you're a mixed race.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind telling me what races make up your heritage?
Okay. Well, I'm not actually 100% sure what kind of definitions of race we're using, but I have ancestry that's German, Filipino, Chinese, and Spanish.
Okay.
So.
Great. In the beginning, we talked about what we're going to do in trying to make sure that you could both identify, address, and sort of how you absorb some of the facts of what you heard about this case. In my questioning of you, or Mr. De Leon's questioning of you, is there anything that has now come to mind concerning your knowledge of facts of the case that we haven't discussed here today?
Nothing.
Okay. I do appreciate your time, and thank you.
If you'll still remain seated for just a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, approach. As to Juror G's. Court will be in recess until 1:40.